But maybe you can start and you can introduce yourself. So who are you and what are you doing?
Yes, well, my pleasure to be here. Well, my name is Ignasi CubiÃ. I'm a biologist by education. I was a co-founder and I'm the current principal of Eco-Intelligent Growth, which is a company that was set up in 2007 with the intention of developing the cradle-to-cradle paradigm shift in the Southern Mediterranean market. Our current activities are mainly focused on the construction sector. So we started to talk cradle-to-cradle to the market in the construction, in the construction market segment, and we are trying now to expand it off from this segment to other related segments. So I mean, from a professional point of view, I have a background of I've been more than 15 years before founding AIG, working for the industry, mainly in the food and pharmaceutical industry, where I got probably the grip on things like ingredient tracking and traceability and things like they are very much related to cradle, which is things like green chemistry, molecular design, and things like that.
Right. But since we start talking about cradle-to-cradle, maybe you can give me a little overview of what is the current status of cradle-to-cradle in Spain or Southern Europe, and maybe if you have some examples of processes or companies developing products that they are toxic-free or that they are hazardous-free.
Correct. Yeah, cradle-to-cradle is well, the background in Spain is relatively small so far because we started our activities in 2007, as I said, and cradle-to-cradle was almost an unknown vision and strategy. At the same time we started, the construction bubble blow up. So we started by bringing a new message to the industry when the industry was in the, towards a bad situation, So we started to talk cradle-to-cradle to the material manufacturing companies. So the first cradle-to-cradle certified products in Spain are from the construction sector, and especially from local material suppliers. We have a set of 6, 7 already certified products now in less than 2 years' time, which is not too bad. And most of these products, as you said, they are toxic-free in the sense of that we don't have heavy metals, we don't have any PVC-based product, we don't have any of the banned substances that they are defined by the cradle-to-cradle program. But it's not the only thing. I mean, what we're trying to do with that is to develop a new business model for the industry. So instead of producing materials to be implemented and installed in buildings, we want to develop product of service that people in the end, they will pay for the use of the product, not for the ownership of the product. So in the end of the day, we're talking about designing a kind of a circular economy when there is a win-win situation for everybody. I mean, for producers, for users, and for the society in general.
What are some of the examples of these certified products that you already mentioned? Those are materials?
Yeah, we have, there's a nice range, I think, because we started with a solar tube, something very much related, by the way, to green energies and the use of daylight in the inside of buildings. So it's a local company that is producing and designing these local tubes. Then we move into tiles. Tiles that can be removed easily, from the building. Then we also had some of the some products, some tabletop products that some very well-known brands, by the way. We are moving now to furniture labs, very specialized companies that they really care about the quality. I mean, what we call the universal quality of the product, and the service. And we are starting also now with things like skin claddings, some interior furniture, things like office furniture and things like that.
Right. And what do you think are the industry sectors that have most potential to go toxic-free, let's say?
Yeah. I think basically we have two big issues here. One thing is the quality, building indoor air quality. So it's quite a funny thing to see that our current indoor air quality in buildings is worse than what we have outside of the city, which is something that is very much related to the emissions of the materials we use. And so this is one part, things that we are in contact with, directly or indirectly. Well, materials in a space would be an indirect contact. So direct contact are things like, for instance, textiles. Everything from fabrics to clothes, and shoes. We should be aware that there's a big room for improvement there, Another one for us is very critical is packaging.
Right.
Because we think that packaging is a kind of it's the filling gap between manufacturers and distributors, and we know that there's a big gap there. And companies, they don't really know how to handle with packaging. We want to develop packaging with a positive footprint.
Right. Well, actually, packaging is one of the areas that if you start into eco-design, if you're a company and you're going to eco-design, out of the 5 areas, that's where you should start, because that's always usually a win-win. The environment wins, but also the business wins.
Yeah, we want to develop what we call packaging 2.0, from the eco-design perspective, because eco-design was very much, focused on reducing, the ecological footprint of the packaging, by reducing the weight, dematerializing packaging, and reducing the transportation impact.
Right.
What we want now is that a package being produced in Spain, turns into carbon for the soil in the Netherlands, and the other way around. So what we think is that because packaging is such a high turnover type of thing, we think it could be a very good strategy for carbon remediation.
Right.
So using packaging as a kind of fertilizer, I think would be a very smart move, and then we wouldn't have to care more about whether the packaging is good or bad. It's simply a good proposal,
Right. What do you think? You are a chemist by education, let's say, and you have like a big background also as a chemist. If we talk about green chemistry, what do you think are the hot areas right now in the field of green chemistry?
Well, indeed, I'm a biochemist. I'm not really a chemist, so I'm somewhere in between a biologist and a chemist, because I had a biologist background, but most of my job career has been in the chemical field, So I think green chemistry is a very, very good approach in order to build the necessary bridges between quality and the physical aspects of things, And what we think the green chemistry principles are really trying to develop a positive agenda for companies and for industries. I think green chemistry, the ultimate role for green chemistry is to be the ultimate quality chemistry, which is, it has nothing to do with whether you use artificial products or natural products, but it's about how you design process. What is the intention behind your design plan, and how you can how you can turn a good design into a good product into a good service into a good proposal for a society, And green chemistry, as well as cradle to cradle, they try to define this framework, What is needed, and is not always there, and this is something that green chemistry is putting a lot of effort on, is that we also need green molecules. So we also need some of the molecules that are not yet available, or we don't really know how to use them. So you need to design the goal on one hand. This is what Cradle to Cradle sets up. And then to develop the tools on the other side, which is what green chemistry brings to the agenda.
Right. Will you talk about the green molecules? Maybe that's a bridge towards talking about to biofuels. What is your take on biofuels, and where do you think biofuels are today, and where they may go in the coming years?
Well, we think that we need to rely on solar income as the only way of green energy. So everything that starts from the sun then turns into a chemical molecule. Then, as Einstein used to say, then magic works, and then you turn into biology. Well, this is a good plan. You know, this is what natural systems do. So everything that is done through a biological process in the end, and is not interfering with quality land or with land that can be used or has to be used for food production. Well, the way you produce these ingredients is done properly through the combination of cradle-to-cradle and green chemistry, for instance, and biomimicry. I think is a very interesting path. You know, the only thing about biofuels is that sometimes people they think that everything that comes from nature is better than what comes from synthetic or artificial products, and this is not always the case. We think a biomolecule or a biofuel can be good or bad depending very much on how you use it and how you produce it.
Right.
So we need to look at both sides of the equation.
Right, and I think that's a very interesting subject. Just would you like a glass of water?
Yes, please.
Okay, no problem. I would like now to jump quickly to the field of renewable energy. And we saw many developments in the last 30 years in this area. We went from a nice to have thing, you know, some 30 years ago, to now have real business cases and see that this is really a competitive, there are competitive technologies out there that compete with more traditional ones. And in that regard, we start talking also about the decentralized grid, and we start talking about consumers becoming producers. What is your take about that, and where do you think we are going in that regard?
Okay, yeah, my impression is that there's a clutch moment for renewable energies, you know, because on one hand, as you said, there's a background of wannabe people, you know, that they want to have renewables because of their attitude and their mindset and so on. Then technology has been developed, but it has been developed very much in those countries where it has been subsidized. And on the other hand, not always the countries with the highest potential were the countries where renewables were developed. So there was a kind of a mismatch between offer and demand and the whole thing. Our point about renewables is that renewables, well, they have to be competitive, and they are competitive in many markets. The point with renewables is that I think, as you said, there are two things here. One thing is production, and the other thing is distribution and storage. I think we have put a lot of energy on identifying the best technologies for production. I think we are getting close to a tipping point where, especially solar panels and windmills and some of the biomass systems, they are really competitive against fossil fuels. Especially because fossil fuels, they are also subsidized. So if we get both clear up from subsidies, you know, I think we already are competitive in many aspects. And still there's a room for improvement, you know, in solar panels. I mean, cost, they can be reduced quite significantly, you know, and there are a lot of interesting developments. The second thing is about distribution and storage, and I think there's a long way to go here, because most of the systems, they are still centralized systems. So I agree with you that, the way we see this being developed in the next 20 years is that it should be a balance between centralized and distributed systems. I don't think distributed will be more than 30-40% in the next 20 years. But I think this 30-40% could be feasible, you know, especially in urban areas.
When you say 30-40% of distributed, you mean that 30-40% of a city or the population of a city will have adopted decentralized energy systems?
Well, I think that it depends how you define decentralized. I mean, if you define decentralized in terms of a bioregion, so you get the green power from the region. I think especially relatively small cities, they can do that. Of course, we have to turn a lot of industries, warehouses, and rooftops, into green power energy producing areas, on the other hand, when we talk about centralized systems, is that these systems that they go to the main grid, and they are and it's green power being produced for more than 200, 300 kilometers away from the user, On the other hand, there are some some technologies that they are very hard to get it distributed. For instance, things like biomass. In the end of the day, you can only have, especially when you talk about wood chips and things like that, when forests come from. So if you use biomass in the city and you don't have any significant supply of biomass, so you will need to, take it from the source, But I think the main message is that there should be a balance between centralized and decentralized systems. And then we go to the third element, which I think is very critical, is storage. Because even an energy mix of, wind, solar, biomass, that it will cover 24 hours, 7 days a week, you still have problems with the storage, because there's a certain mismatch between production hours and using hours, So I think the storage systems are one of the main technology to be developed. And I think that concepts like smart grids and smart cities and electric vehicles being, storage units for green power, I think there's a lot of room for improvement there.
I'm wondering, we started a conversation actually before we started recording, you were mentioning you have a role now advising the municipality of Barcelona, and if you put now the hat of like an advisor of the city, what kind of conversations are going on in Barcelona, which happens to be a harbor city, like in Rotterdam, regarding the future of energy?
Yeah, this is a very important point, because I think Barcelona, we're proud of being what we call probably the first city or the first environment to do modern urban planning. So we had this program from Rotterdam 100 years ago, and Barcelona, the development of Barcelona has been planned, which is a very important starting point. The problem with a city like Barcelona is it's a highly compacted city, and there's relatively little space available, at the ground level for doing anything. So one of the things we are looking into is that how we can optimize the physical space, not only to produce energy, which is an important thing, but also to collect water and to collect waste. So how we can turn a relatively unproductive city into a highly productive city. And I think harbors, by their nature, they are very, 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 very strategic points to do that. Because harbors are traditionally points for material flow. There's a lot of inputs and outputs of goods and services, So I think there's all this dynamism from harbors. It helps to understand what kind of flows, both material and energy flows, are needed, So we think that cities are setting the pace for all the future developments, And we think those cities with harbors, where there's a lot of flow of different systems, I think they have a special role,
I will take the opportunity, because now that we are into the subject, is there something that you would recommend, for instance, to the port of Rotterdam or to the port of Barcelona as an entity? Is there anything that you think they could do that it will bring some competitivity and at the same time be in line with the principles of cradle to cradle or sustainability principles?
Well, there are already some very interesting projects in the shipping area We are working on things like trying to identify all the materials, buds and knolls that they are in a ship, you know. So why we could not think about harbors being a kind of a focal point for these assembly projects? Why we cannot think of harbors not only like a kind of a space that is some things are happening, and we can put even more value to this space, and the harbor itself becomes a center of productivity. And for instance, things like design for disassembly or disassembling workshops and spaces, I think it really fits into harbor nature, you know. So this could be a good start.
Okay. Well, just to finish, because the last subject I wanted to talk is about energy efficiency. I think it's very much in line with our renewables, but we see the technology is evolving, and regarding mobility, especially, and electricity, energy systems are becoming more and more efficient. I wonder if you have any local example, for instance, of energy efficiency, or if some example comes to your mind that we can discuss about.
Well, sure. I would start, by the way, with a redefinition of energy efficiency. I think energy efficiency is focused on cost, and energy effectiveness is focused on quality. And what we think we should move is from a cost mindset into a quality mindset. That's why really fosters innovation, the quality mindset. So, of course, we need to reduce cost of the use of energy, but by reducing the cost of the use of energy is not always the best way to get more green energy or less use of energy. So what we think is that we should couple energy efficiency with the use of renewables and the use of more effective ways of using energy to develop what we call a kind of energy conservation type of agenda, you know. And when we talk about energy conservation, for instance, in some of our projects, we have been looking, for instance, Hostal Ampurias. It's one of the projects we developed, you know. When we decided in the very end of the projects to develop the new spa area, which was probably the most energy-intensive area of the whole hotel, we really look into how to make the whole space more energy-friendly. So that's why, for instance, we use the solar tubes, because we found that by using solar daylight, we're not only reducing dramatically the energy bill, but we were also improving the value of the space. So these are the kind of things that we should think about. The same thing happens with remediation of houses. I mean, a lot of people is talking about, okay, using metering systems and how to reduce the energy bill and blah, 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 blah. But in the end of the day, there's, we can couple a lot of things with that. And for instance, making our spaces more productive is very much related to the use of daylight.
Right. So for you, I like this idea of the shift from efficiency to effectiveness, and meaning going to quality, right? That reduce maybe energy consumption. Last question before we finish. How do you see energy efficiency, renewables, energy, and green chemistry becoming industries on their own and creating jobs? What is your view between sustainability, especially in these areas, and job creation?
That's a very important point. We need jobs, and we need the high-quality jobs, and we need jobs in the industry. And we need the industry to turn from a 19th century idea of a production plant into something much more complex. So I think the way to do that is by combining all three elements: green chemistry, energy efficiency, and renewables. That's why we work with the Cradle to Cradle, because it has this holistic view, how you can put together things to create wealth, to create abundance, to create opportunities for everyone, everywhere, all time. The main thing for us is that we think that we have a materials problem, not an energy problem. And we have a materials problem because we don't have a plan to produce and to regenerate abundance in the planet. So what we need is to create jobs that they regenerate abundance in the planet. So I think there are a lot of opportunities there. Green chemistry brings some of the building blocks and the tools to do that. And what is important is that we go a little bit back to the basics. You know, when the first companies, the first industrial companies, they were more focused on first values, principles, and goals, and then strategies and metrics. While today, most of the companies, they start with metrics, then strategies, and then no one reaches the values, you know. So I think this is important because when we make this, turn these things upside down, we also find a lot of opportunities that are around the corner, but we simply don't see them. So definitely, job creation, industrial regeneration, and a totally different way of thinking about what is a company intention or a job intention is what we think is needed.
Well, Ignasi, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and we'll let you know what is the follow-up of this interview.
Thank you. My pleasure.